Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink says he is prepared to go head-to-head with Eskom to move towards securing electricity from independent power producers. Brink made the remarks when he presented the city's energy plan yesterday. Part of this plan is to appoint private electricity generators to reduce Tshwane's dependence on Eskom and to reduce the impact of load shedding ultimately. At the same time, the mayor revealing that 2 power stations which have not generated electricity in a decade are costing the city up to 300 million rand a year to maintain. Cilliers Brink joins us this morning. It's great to talk to you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. Why this apparent reluctance to allow for independent power producers?
So, I'm not sure that is entirely accurate. I know that Eskom has, for instance, told Joburg or Gauteng that, they can't have the power produced at Chemtron offset from stages of load shedding. But our situation is so fluid and Eskom is in such a bad shape that I'm sure as circumstances for Eskom deteriorate, that the landscape is going to change. I was encouraged yesterday when the Minister of Electricity, Osienzo Ramakgopa, welcomed the plans that the city of Tshwane have announced in regards to Rooiwal and Pretoria West and our energy plan in general. So I don't think that it necessarily has to be a titanic battle. If we can get Gauteng or as much of Gauteng off of the Eskom supply, we can reduce the strain on the national grid significantly. And that will help Eskom to survive. It won't be in opposition to Eskom.
Yeah, but I mean, current legislation, this is why you're saying that you're ready to go head-to-head if indeed there is any opposition, because the legislation doesn't allow municipalities to buy directly from independent power producers.
Well, no, that has changed. Luckily, there was a challenge in court by the Western Cape government and the city of Cape Town, and there have been significant changes to South Africa's energy market. So many of the municipalities are now exploring procuring electricity from IPPs, including the city of Cape Town, Ekurhuleni, and so forth. So there has been a significant change to the regulation, making it easier, and there's simply no other way because Eskom cannot supply the electricity required by municipalities in order to power an industrial economy such as ours. The unavailability of electricity puts an absolute gap or an absolute cap on economic growth. And so some of the reforms that have happened to the energy market do indeed make it possible for municipalities to procure power independent from Eskom. The only question is, will we be able to use that power to offset stages of load shedding? But again, because of the fluidity of our energy situation, I don't think Eskom and even NERSA has got much of a choice. We are going to have to go for the solutions that prevent grid collapse, that prevent, the economy from falling behind the rest of Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, whether as part of your discussions as Tshwane Mayor, with Eskom, with NERSA, for example, whether the impact that surely will come insofar as Eskom's bottom line is concerned, the more and more we gain independence from the grid, the more we try to offset higher stages of load shedding, the kind of impact that that's going to have on Eskom's already struggling bottom line. Has that come up for you as well?
So, the national government has been told, and I think it's accepted now as a policy, that Eskom has to be broken up into a transmission business, a generation business, and then, a business that sells electricity to municipalities. And each of those entities have to stand on their own. So the game is already changing for Eskom. There is no survival of a national state utility that cannot provide the electricity needs for the country in its current form. So I think that if we're realistic about the future prospects of Eskom, if we listen to energy experts, this changing of the game is the only way the country is going to survive, and the only way at least parts of Eskom, at least the transmission business and the sale business is going to coexist, or is going to continue to exist.
There's a strap on screen this morning about these 2 unused power stations costing your metro 300 million rand to maintain, Mr. Mayor. Tell us more about that.
So these power stations have been in disuse for more than a decade. At Rooiwal, we can power up, those turbines, but unfortunately it uses low-grade coal, which we have to keep in very large stockpiles and use in great volumes. So the city doesn't have the operational capacity, the financial wherewithal to do that. And yet both of these power stations provide an inlet into the grid. Mm-hmm. The only way we can really put those power stations to use is with investment from the private sector. And so the City Council last week approved a report to take on public participation, the proposal to lease these power stations out to the private sector for an investment horizon of 40 years. We think that is a compelling offer to the market and really an important part of our greater energy plan to become more independent of Eskom, to reduce the strain on what Eskom has to supply to the country. But of course, it's only one of a set of measures to ensure greater energy independence.
Yeah, absolutely. You've said that there are 40-year leases to private businesses that would be in the offing. And do you have options already for who would take over those leases?
No, because we're right at the beginning of the process, and we don't want to pick winners or unsolicited bids right at the outset. We want to follow each and every step. The municipal asset transfer regulations require us to take on public participation leases of this magnitude, and that's what we're doing now. And once we get the comments of the public and we decide to lease it out, then a request for proposals will follow, where players in this market will tell the city of Tshwane what they have to offer in terms of the kind of energy that they generate there, the kind of capital investment that they'll bring, and then the best offer will be chosen. So we're certainly not preempting the outcome of this process or picking a particular supplier or solution right at the beginning of the process.
And then, Mr. Mayor, while I have you on the line, I have to ask about your discussions with SAMU and the ongoing strike in your metro. Service delivery massively impacted since July already. Any latest moves that you can tell us about this morning?
So on Friday, the Labour Court made permanent an interdict obtained by the city right at the outset of the strike against SAMU and their leadership. And we believe this is a significant step also because the court gave a cost order against SAMU. Now, SAMU denies that there's a strike, believe it or not. And as the city has taken disciplinary actions, dismissals, the docking of pay and so forth, we've seen a significant return to work by employees. And so stay away is not the biggest issue affecting the city. It is the criminal attacks on services, infrastructure, vehicles, personnel of the city. That's really what is causing the backlog in services and waste collection in particular. And that's why we've said to the South African police, we can't treat this as an internal security concern or simply a labor dispute, because we suspect that the strike has been hijacked by criminal elements with their own economic and political interests, and it is really at the level of organized crime. So we do need the cooperation of the South African police, crime intelligence, to intercept calls and messages and to see who is planning these attacks on our trucks and our people so that it can be stopped proactively. We're, of course, open to discussing, to speaking to the unions. There's a lot of trauma that has been caused by the strike and the conflict. But of course, we can't mediate over crime. We can't, decide to just accept that criminal acts are committed against the city. And the second thing we can't really mediate is the fact that the city isn't in a financial position to pay these salary increases, and that's why we will have to let the Labour Court and our review of that process run its course.
Yeah, 600 million rand is what you'd need, right, to meet that kind of salary demand. So what can you tell residents this morning about, what the future is for service delivery in areas that have been heavily impacted?
So it is important to note that this fight isn't about, egos or facing down the unions. It's about what residents can afford to pay. If the city was simply to buckle, we would place the entire institution and service delivery at serious risk. The irony is that last weekend, Kasatu and SAMU launched a campaign of mass action in the Free State against municipalities that can't pay their workers on time and that use pension contributions to fund operational expenditure. And that is exactly the kind of situation that we would want to avoid. So my message to residents is we're fighting for the future service delivery in the city for value for the money that you pay in services, for the continued existence of the municipality. And we're trying our level best to catch up on waste collection backlogs and to restore the situation to normality. And we're working with the South African police in order to do so. To workers, my message would be, I am desperately fighting for the continued existence of this municipality and for protecting jobs of those who work for the municipality. We don't want to be in a Free State situation, and that's why we've got to make the difficult decisions in the short term so that we don't have even more difficult situations in the long term.
Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink, thanks very much indeed for joining us this Tuesday morning.